Please raise your hand if you have ever been personally victimized by Are You Afraid of the Dark? Hello Internet, my name is Ren. This is Ren Rants, a spooky channel where I rant about many things that I care about with a particular focus on pop culture and politics. In this video, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to be ranking episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark by how much they traumatized me as a child. The episodes are going to be ranked from moderately spooky to actively gave me nightmares. So I'm just going to jump into this. Please remember though, this is a totally subjective list just based on what scared me as a kid. So if your favorite episode isn't featured here or you didn't find these particular episodes scary, totally fine. This is just what I think and what formed the basis of many of my adult fears and paranoias. I was always kind of a creepy, morbid kid growing up. You know, I was that kid who would drag their entire family into Hot Topic and you knew exactly which one was responsible for it. I liked to be scared. I really liked the Goosebumps books, scary stories to tell in the dark. Some of my favorite shows were the animated Tales from the Crypt Keeper, Goosebumps, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and of course, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Some of these obviously held up better than others, but I wasn't really allowed to watch scary movies as a kid. My mom didn't own that many, and we lived in a small town, so I didn't have much access, and I had to get my scares where I could. So I would say Are You Afraid of the Dark probably formed a lot of my early love and appreciation of horror and scary and spooky things, and that did translate into adulthood. And now looking back, I do recognize that Are You Afraid of the Dark does not hold up very well. A lot of it definitely is filtered through my nostalgia goggles, but I still really love it for the role that it played in my life, and it's still fun to return to, especially on Halloween, just for something that's a little bit more lighthearted and kid-friendly, but sometimes actually still pretty scary. So, without further ado, and starting with mildly spooky episodes, let's just jump in. The episode I rewatched the most is actually at the bottom of this list because it's not that scary. It's The Tale of the Prom Queen. In my opinion, it's the best episode from season 1. It was spooky and had a fun ghost story threaded throughout in a very mysterious tone. It just ranks so low on the list because the ending's actually really sweet. And there weren't that many scares. Although there is one particular scene where they're out on the water at night in a rowboat trying to contact a ghost, and bubbling comes up from underneath, and the bubbles chase them as they try to flee in the rowboat. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but for me, the whole atmosphere of that scene, it was very spooky and kind of contributes to my general anxiety when I can't see what's going on beneath the surface of water. Although, as you'll see later on, this is not the episode that I think most contributes to that fear. But overall, this episode was really fun, a little bit spooky. I think it holds up the best, especially because it doesn't require all that many special effects. I would recommend watching it. If you were to just check out a few episodes out of curiosity, this is one that holds up pretty well. Also, the 90s hair and fashion in this episode is just... Next, we have The Tale of Laughing in the Dark. This episode had a very stupid title. I don't like it. It's not very good. But the episode itself is kind of fun. It's a relatively simple premise. Basically, a young boy steals the nose off of a carnival clown on a dare, and then the carnival clown comes after him to get it back. I definitely credit this episode with my fear and anxiety around clowns. As a kid, I did not see the first It movie until I was a little bit older because it's just not something my mom would have let me watch. So this was my first real exposure to clown-related horror, and it was very effective. A lot of the visuals of the clown are really creepy, but the scares themselves are actually pretty mild. It's really just those teeth that will haunt my nightmares forever. But yeah, it's a fun episode. It holds up. It's especially good if you like clown horror. Moving on up the list, we have The Tale of the Pinball Wizard. This one edges out Laughing in the Dark, not because it's actually better executed, but just because I found the premise scarier to me as a child. In this episode, a little boy convinces a shop owner who owns a pinball shop to let him watch the store over his lunch hour. The kid really wants to play a new pinball game, but the shop owner forbids it. And as soon as the shop owner leaves, of course, he plays the game and he gets trapped inside. And he goes through all of these trials to beat the game. And then when he finally beats the game, a big silver ball rolls out and he realizes he's trapped in the pinball game forever. The episode doesn't have a ton of scary visuals. It's mostly very corny and a lot of special effects that do not hold up well. I'd say the most visually creepy moments are when he's running through the abandoned mall, and that definitely feeds into my anxiety around abandoned spaces that are usually lit and crowded. But really, it's just the concept of being trapped in the game forever that child me did not like. That is so much. That is so scary. Just eternity in a pinball game. Oh my god. But I digress. Moving up the list, we have, into the moderately spooky category, we have The Tale of the Dangerous Soup. This episode is kind of absurd, but it features a young Neve Campbell, who of course you will remember as Sidney Prescott from the Scream movies, playing a waitress named Nani, who works in a popular restaurant where the main item is soup that costs $100 a bowl. People love the soup, people keep coming back for the soup, but people are also mysteriously quitting their job for no reason, despite it seemingly being a decent job. It turns out Dr. Vink, the owner of the restaurant, is extracting fear from his employees through some kind of ritual with a gargoyle. And what it does is it figures out what they're afraid of and uses that to produce the secret ingredient for his delicious soup. And this episode's pretty freaky. I think the scariest moment is when Nani is trapped in a walk-in freezer or fridge type thing and the walls start closing in on her. I don't love tight spaces. She obviously doesn't love tight spaces, so that scene is just a lot. And then of course they get trapped indefinitely in Dr. Vink's clutches, presumably so he can extract a whole bunch of extra fear from them to keep his business going for a while. And this episode just had a lot of beats that were pretty freaky, but that scene stuck with me and made me nervous. Did not like that. Into the actively gave me nightmares section, at the bottom here, we have The Tale of Vampire Town. It's definitely a higher ranking one for me. As a kid, I was a bit of a vampire fanatic. In elementary school, I got my hands on a book called The Vampire Compendium that covered a lot of vampire lore and legends and stories throughout history. And after that, I was just really interested in any vampire type media. Interview with the Vampire is one of the few scarier movies my mom let me watch when I was younger. Why? I also read the book when I was way too young to read it. But I digress. Anyway, so The Tale of Vampire Town features a goth boy named Adder, who I totally wanted to be, and who also looked like the one kid who would drag his entire family into Hot Topic. And they go on a vacation to a town called Wisteria, which he selected specifically because of their legends about vampires. He wants to be a vampire hunter, and he has a strategy of trying to think like a vampire so that he can hunt vampires. This leads to a funny misunderstanding where the staff at the hotel where they're staying think that he is a vampire because he only wants to check in after sundown, and he's got a lot of questions about the catacombs underneath the hotel. He breaks into the catacombs. He finds the coffin for the ancient vampire Dreyfus, and then when the employees who think that he's a vampire try to chase him down, he unwittingly frees the vampire, and it's pretty horrifying. So this decrepit, scary vampire chases them around in the catacombs, and he's about to bite one of the stooges that have been chasing Adder, and Adder lures him away with fancy luxury raven's blood. And as the vampire is drinking the fancy blood, He opens up the window and the sun bursts through and dusts him. And while this episode wasn't all that scary, some of the visual effects for tiny little child me were quite frightening, and so this one definitely stuck with me into adulthood. But it's nothing compared to the nightmare fuel that was The Tale of Many Faces. This one was so scary to me and absolutely gave me nightmares. Basically, an aspiring model and actress goes to a mysterious theater in the hopes of getting recognition and a boost for her career. She meets a mysterious woman who tells her to apply powder with properties to her skin. After a day of wearing the powder, the girl, Emma, is offered a modeling contract when before she had been dismissed from the shoot. She excitedly returns to the theater only to have her face stolen. And in its place, just a horrifying, flat, clay, fishy thing with white eyes and just molded nose and lips, and it's just horrifying. And then they walk around in these little masks in a cult because the theater lady has them so scared to leave because they'll be shunned in the outside world for their facelessness, which fair. It's a lot. And then, of course, they overwhelm her, and they give her back her own horrifying 300-year-old face because she's been stealing faces to stay young and to use in her theater plays. And the scene of her just olding up is also a lot, but it definitely doesn't hold a candle to the terrifying look of the Faceless. And then I just really, as a child, got kind of caught up in the anguish of the idea of having your face stolen. No, this episode, it messed me up and it stayed with me. But I would say number one, the nightmariest episode of them all, is The Tale of the Dead Man's Float. I feel like this probably tops a lot of people's lists because the visuals were unforgiving, and at least for me, it definitely, I think, is why, as an adult, I'm really uncomfortable with water where I can't see the bottom or I can't see what's happening under the surface, or if there's a lot of seaweed or anything and I get tangled in it. No. And this episode, I think, is why. I watched this when I was very young. And basically, it's a pretty simple story as well. Most of these are. The episodes are short. A kid is drowned in a school pool in the 1950s by a mysterious force because the lifeguard was too busy making out with his older sister, so didn't notice the drowning till it was too late. The pool is shut down. And then in the 90s, which at the time was present day, a young nerd a hidden pool and investigates it. What ensues is the most shit-terrifying scene, and genuinely, I really do think this is why I'm still scared of water to this day. Despite this, I am a scuba diver, and I've even gone on a night dive, so, I have overcome that fear to an extent, but every time I am swimming, I think about this episode. It lives rent-free in my brain. Look at this. Oh my god. To be fair, as an adult, the effects aren't all that scary and aren't that much to write home about, but as a kid, this image was seared into my brain. I was so scared. Oh my gosh. I still rewatch this episode and I'm still just no thank you. No thank you. So, overall, Are You Afraid of the Dark doesn't hold up super well for an adult audience. I have not checked out the reboot yet. But, it's still fun to indulge in a little bit of spooky nostalgia. Seasons 1 through 4 are on CBS. Later seasons require a little more digging to find. Some of the stories hold up pretty well. And again, I think The Tale of the Prom Queen is probably my favorite in terms of being relatively simple and having a fun reveal. Obviously, Bly Manor stole one of their reveals from this episode. Of course, that's definitely what happened. I did actually want to talk about Bly Manor before Halloween because, oh my god, it's so good. But I have so much to say about it that I just didn't have the time. So this is what you get instead. So there you have it, my personal rankings of Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes, from mildly spooky to nightmare fuel. Let me know if you were traumatized by any of these episodes in the comments section down below, and we'll see you next time. Wiedersehen.